a hunger that cannot be filled, a body that devours itself, a spirit that walks on frozen nights, thin as death and hungrier than the grave. We call it the Wendigo, a monster, a cautionary tale, a legend of cannibalism in the deep forests of North America. But the Wendigo is older than horror movies, older than colonial ghost stories, older, perhaps, than even the first Europeans who set foot on this land. Hidden inside the Wendigo myth is something far stranger, a story about survival, greed, and the thin line between human and inhuman. Journey with me into a legend that may stretch back thousands of years, because the Wendigo is older, darker, and more revealing than you think. Among the Algonquian-speaking peoples of North America, Cree, Ojibwe, Innu, Naskapi, stories tell of a terrifying creature that emerges in the depths of winter. The Wendigo is said to be a giant, emaciated being. Its ribs show through its skin. Its lips are tattered and bloody. Its appetite, endless. It devours flesh, and no matter how much it eats, it only grows hungrier. Some say the Wendigo is a human cursed by greed, transformed after turning to cannibalism in desperate times. Others describe it as a malevolent spirit that possesses people, driving them mad with hunger until they too become Wendigos. The fear of this creature was not entertainment. It was survival. In the frozen forests of the north, winter hunger was very real. When the snow buried villages and the animals vanished, starvation crept close. To eat human flesh was the ultimate taboo, and yet, people did it. Desperation demanded it. And so the Wendigo was born as a story, not just of monsters, but of what happens when humans cross the final line. The first written description comes from 1636. Paul Lejeune, a Jesuit missionary living among the Algonquin, wrote of a terrifying spirit his hosts feared. They called it Windigo. He described it as a cannibal giant, prowling the forests, devouring humans. Later, in the 17th and 18th centuries, more missionaries, fur traders, and explorers recorded the same beliefs among different Algonquian peoples, always the same core: hunger, winter, cannibalism, taboo. But these were not new fears. Scholars agree the Wendigo was already ancient by the time Lejeune heard the stories. Folklorist Basil Johnston, himself Anishinaabe, described the Wendigo as the spirit of selfishness, gluttony, and excess. Anthropologists note that the very word Wendigo may come from Proto-Algonquian, a language spoken around 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. If true, then the concept may stretch that far back in oral tradition. But what does the Wendigo really mean? To the Algonquian peoples, it was more than a campfire story. It was a warning. Imagine the ice closing in, your people trapped, food gone, snow waist deep. You feel the hunger inside, and you know what lies beside you: flesh, your own family. The Wendigo is that moment of temptation given monstrous shape. To eat another human was to lose your humanity, to be consumed by hunger so completely that you became hunger itself. This is why the Wendigo is never satisfied, because greed can never be satisfied. The Wendigo is not only a monster outside, it is the monster within. But the Wendigo is not only a story of the past. For centuries, people in the forests of Canada and the northern United States described something even stranger: a sickness of the mind. Missionaries, doctors, and anthropologists began to record cases of so-called Wendigo psychosis. They told of men and women who, in times of famine, became obsessed with eating human flesh, even when food was available. Families described how one relative would suddenly behave like the monster of legend, claiming to see human flesh all around them, feeling consumed by hunger. One of the most infamous cases comes from 1878. A Cree man named Swift Runner, a former guide for the Northwest Mounted Police, killed and ate his wife and children during a harsh winter. When arrested, he said a Wendigo had possessed him. He was executed in 1879. To European settlers, this seemed like madness. To the Cree, it was something worse. the Wendigo had taken another victim. The Wendigo's hunger is terrifying because it speaks to a universal taboo: cannibalism. Across cultures, to eat human flesh is to cross a sacred boundary. Anthropologists have long noted that in survival situations, sieges, famines, shipwrecks, humans sometimes do resort to it. In Europe, we hear of it during medieval famines, or even the Donner Party in 1846, trapped in the Sierra Nevada snow. In China, chronicles from the late Ming dynasty describe people forced to eat the dead during droughts. Among Algonquian peoples, winter was always the season of danger. Food vanished, snow closed in. The Wendigo story reflects this very real fear. It wasn't an imaginary monster lurking in the woods. It was what might happen if you let desperation win. This is why the Wendigo is often said to stalk the winter forests, its breath freezing the air, its footprints marking the snow. Winter itself was its hunting ground. But what did the Wendigo look like? Here the tales vary. Some describe it as a giant, 15 feet tall, its heart made of ice, its lips chewed away from hunger. Others imagine a gaunt, skeletal figure with glowing eyes, or even a human so wasted by starvation that it no longer looks alive. In some versions, the Wendigo has the head of a stag, antlers looming in the dark forest. This image has become popular in modern horror films and art, though older indigenous sources more often described it as human-shaped, twisted by hunger. The common thread? Emptiness. The Wendigo is defined not by what it is, but by what it lacks: warmth, humanity, satisfaction. Its body is famine given form. But how old is this tale? The Jesuit Paul Lejeune recorded it in 1636, but he already called it ancient. The Canadian Encyclopedia notes that Indigenous oral traditions described the Wendigo for many centuries before Europeans arrived. And linguists go further. The word Wendigo is thought to come from Proto-Algonquian, the ancestor language spoken around 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. In that language, reconstructed words like Winterkoa referred to spirits or strange beings, perhaps linked to the Wendigo's name. This suggests the concept of the Wendigo could be thousands of years old, even if the details shifted over time. So when we speak of a 3,000-year-old secret, we're not exaggerating wildly. We are tracing a legend back to the very roots of Algonquian culture, long before Europeans wrote it down, back when hunger and winter shaped every part of life. What then does the Wendigo represent? For some, it is a spirit of famine, born when times were hardest. For others, it is greed itself, the hunger that grows, the more it is fed. The Anishinaabe writer Basil Johnston put it this way: the Wendigo was the spirit of cannibalism, gluttony, and greed, a reminder of what happens when one individual consumes more than their share, when selfishness outweighs community. In this light, the Wendigo is not only about survival cannibalism, it is about the danger of imbalance, taking too much, eating the world, consuming until nothing remains. And in a way that makes it not just an ancient legend, but a warning that still speaks to us today. The Wendigo is not alone. Across the world, hunger and cannibalism have given birth to monsters. In ancient Greece, poets spoke of Erysichthon, a man cursed with endless hunger after he cut down a sacred grove. No matter how much he ate, his belly cried for more. At last, he devoured himself. In Hindu mythology, the Preta are hungry ghosts, thin skeletal spirits cursed with enormous bellies and tiny mouths. They wander the earth forever craving food, but never able to swallow enough. In China, Buddhist tales describe igui, or hungry ghosts, tormented by their own insatiable appetites. They are punished souls, suffering in a cycle of craving and denial. And in Japan, the gaki are much the same, driven by greed in life, condemned in death to eternal starvation. The pattern is unmistakable. Across continents, across millennia, humans have told stories of creatures whose hunger defines them. Stories that remind us that desire, unchecked, can become a curse. So when Algonquian peoples spoke of the Wendigo, they were echoing a truth shared across humanity, that hunger is the line between man and monster. When European settlers heard these stories, they often misunderstood them. To Jesuits, the Wendigo became evidence of the devil at work among pagan peoples. To fur traders, it was a frightening curiosity to record in journals. To outsiders, it was a ghost story. But to the Algonquian peoples, it was neither Satan nor entertainment. It was a way of naming a threat that was both physical and spiritual. Winter itself had a face. Starvation had a voice. In the 19th century, as anthropology developed, the Wendigo became a case study. Scholars debated whether Wendigo psychosis was a genuine mental illness or simply a colonial misunderstanding of cultural beliefs. Some dismissed it as hysteria, others argued it was real, a cultural expression of the unbearable weight of famine. Even today, psychologists remain cautious. Some indigenous scholars argue the term psychosis imposes Western categories on a deeply spiritual belief. For many Cree and Ojibwe, the Wendigo remains a very real force, not a metaphor. To them, it is disrespectful to dismiss it as just a story. Yet the Wendigo has also grown beyond its origins. In modern literature and culture, it has become a metaphor. The anthropologist Lou Morano argued that the Wendigo symbolized colonialism itself, the European hunger for land, resources, and fur. Like the Wendigo, colonial greed was insatiable, consuming indigenous communities without ever being satisfied. Writers in the 20th century used the Wendigo as a symbol of capitalism, of industry devouring the natural world. In this reading, the Wendigo is not just a winter demon, it is a warning about consumption without limit. And in horror fiction, from Algernon Blackwood's 1910 story The Wendigo to Stephen King's Pet Sematary, the creature has become an icon of terror, stalking the forests of pop culture as it once haunted the camps of hunters and trappers. Look closely, and you'll see the same narrative move that repeats in myths across time. The Wendigo is not only about hunger, it is about truth revealed through ordeal. In Princess and the Pea, the test was sensitivity. In Cinderella, it was a slipper. In Gilgamesh, it was sleeplessness. And in the Wendigo story, the test is hunger. Who can resist? Who will give in? To resist hunger is to remain human. To give in is to cross into monstrosity. The Wendigo's endless appetite unmasks the boundary. It is a secret trial, older than colonial records, older than Andersen's fairy tales, perhaps as old as hunger itself. But the Wendigo didn't vanish with the old forests or the end of the fur trade. It still walks among us, not always as a monster with claws, but as an idea. In the early 20th century, writers like Algernon Blackwood brought the Wendigo into supernatural fiction. His 1910 story, The Wendigo, imagines a hunting trip, where the forest itself whispers of the creature. Later, Stephen King would summon it in Pet Sematary, where the Wendigo lurks beyond the barrier of the dead. Hollywood picked it up too, from Supernatural to Until Dawn to Marvel Comics. The Wendigo has become a horror icon, a shorthand for hunger without end. But Indigenous voices still remind us, this is not just a scary story. Ojibwe author Louise Erdrich writes of the Wendigo as a metaphor for destructive desire, for greed that eats away at the land and the people. To the Cree, the Wendigo is still a moral lesson, a warning about imbalance, taking more than one's share, consuming until nothing remains. And perhaps that is the 3,000-year-old secret hidden in this story, that the Wendigo is not just about famine in the snow, but about what happens when humans consume too much. Think about it. The Wendigo devours endlessly, yet only grows hungrier. That is the very image of overconsumption, of capitalism, of our modern appetite for resources. Forests cut, oceans emptied, mountains gutted, and still, it is not enough. The more we feed, the emptier we feel. Some scholars call this the Wendigo economy, a system that devours everything, but never satisfies. In that sense, the old Algonquian warning has become newly urgent. The Wendigo is not only a monster of the forest, it is us. But remember the pattern. In folklore, the test always reveals the truth. The Wendigo test is hunger, and the truth it reveals is this: mortals are fragile. We must eat, we must consume, but if we cross the line, if our hunger becomes greed, we are no longer human. We are something else. Just as the princess proved her divine nature by failing to sleep, just as Gilgamesh proved his mortality by failing to stay awake, so too the Wendigo story reveals a truth, that to consume endlessly is to become monstrous. This is why the Wendigo endures, because it is not only about winter cannibalism in a northern forest. It is about the test we all face every day. So when you hear the word Wendigo, don't picture only a skeletal giant with antlers. Picture a warning carried across centuries. Picture Algonquian storytellers around winter fires, reminding their children that hunger is not only of the belly, but of the spirit. The Wendigo is the oldest hunger, a hunger that never ends, a hunger that unmasks who we truly are. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is why the story has lasted nearly 3,000 years. Because we are still being tested,